It's a real pleasure to welcome Garry Ridge to the Caring CEO. Welcome, Garry.
G'day, Graham. It's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me along.
My pleasure. Garry, what does care in the workplace mean to you?
Well, I think care starts with a simple but profound belief. People are not resources to be managed, they are human beings to be valued and coached. And to me, care means showing up every day, genuinely interested in the growth, well being, and success of people around you. And actually, Graham, it's not a soft concept. It's a leadership discipline that, we learned along the way. During my leadership at WD-40 company, we didn't talk about employee satisfaction. We talked about belonging. And there's a difference between satisfaction, which is a transactional behavior, and belonging, which is emotional. And care really does create belonging. So it's seeing the whole person, it's candor with kindness, it's learning and coaching, not judging, and it's consistency. And at the heart of it, it's all about who you are as a person and what you're going to do to help those you have the privilege to lead really step into a better version of themselves.
When you think about your career, long career at WD-40, could you give our listeners a bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually started with WD-40 in Australia in 1987 with a fax machine under my bed. I worked for the WD-40 licensee in Australia before I joined WD-40. And in that period of the 80s, the company that was a US-based public company was starting to really get serious about their global expansion. How would they take that blue and yellow can with a little red top to many countries around the world? It had sprinkles of awareness, and Australia was one of them. So I got to know the folks at WD-40 in the US, and the licensing agreement was coming to an end. And one day I was having a conversation with the then president of the company in the US, and he said, "Would you like to join us and help us build our Asia Pacific business?" And I said, "Wow, that sounds interesting." Anyhow, my dad, who worked for the same company for 50 years, from when he was 15 to when he was 65, he started as a fitter and turner and ended up being an engineer. I said to him, "Dad, what do you think about working for WD-40?" He said, "You can't go wrong with that stuff, son." So, number one piece of advice, listen to Dad. So I joined in 87. I worked from 87 to 94 out of our Sydney office. I spent a lot of time in Asia, starting to build our distribution there. And then in 94, I was having a conversation with the president of the company, and I said, "Is there anything else you'd like me to do?" And he said, "Would you like to move to the US?" And I said, "To do what?" He said, "Come over here and help me take the brand to the world." And I said, "Well, that sounds pretty interesting." So, it's a short decision, wasn't it? Not really. Pack up your toys and move from Australia to the US. And in 97, he retired. And I guess for my sins, I got to take the role as the leader. And for 25 years after that, I was CEO of a US public company and learned a lot and had a lot of fun.
And you have I guess, a unique approach to building the right culture. What are the foundations of that for you?
I think it's pretty simple. Well, number one is, do people know, and are they treated like they belong in an organization? One of the, as you know, Graham, one of the most powerful desires we have as human beings, we want to belong. We want to
Mm,
feel like we're meaningful to someone. Everyone
yeah.
listening to us today has left a party, an organization, or a relationship because they didn't feel like they belong. So number one, do you create a place of belonging? Number two is, do the people in the organization know that the work they do matters? It makes a difference. And are they being recognized by that?
Mm,
I say making a contribution to something bigger than yourself.
mm,
The next one is, are we creating an organization where there's a high degree of what Amy Edmondson calls psychological safety or reduction of
mm.
fear? And we did that where we said, we're going to talk about being a learning organization. We're not going to make mistakes. We're going to have learning moments. And then finally, and I think this is as critical as the other three, is we're not there to manage people. You manage your bank account and you manage inventory. Our role is to be a coach. And a
Mm.
coach's role is to help those that have the privilege to lead, because leadership is truly a privilege. Help those that have the privilege to lead continue to thrive, grow, and do great work.
Yeah. There's so much overlap in what you've talked about with Bob Chapman
Oh,
from
yeah.
Barry Waymiller. I'm sure you'd be aware of him and his book, Everybody Matters, but he has similar themes through his book. And I was fortunate enough to interview him twice, and very sad when he passed away. Very
Yeah.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Bob and Simon Sinek, and Simon's a good friend of his. I spent a lot of time with Bob, and just a wonderful person, and really, again, does create that organization where people they really do feel like they matter.
And I understand there was a Aristotle quote which really guided your thoughts about leadership workplaces as well. Could you share that with our listeners, please?
Yeah. Well, there's a story behind that. I was given the privilege to lead the company in 1997, and I knew with the help of the people around us and my experiences, how to actually market the product. What was always on my mind was how do you build cultures where now that the sun was truly never going to set on the organization, where people are empowered and they felt like they belonged and they mattered. Having worked for a period of time away from the center of the company, which was San Diego, I kind of knew what it was like to be out there. I didn't know how to do that. And 1999, I was on a Qantas 747. I was flying from Los Angeles to Sydney. I was 38,000 feet above the South Pacific Ocean, about 2 hours out of landing at Kingsford Smith Airport. And as you do when you travel, you take stuff to read. And there's the one light shining down from the top, and I'm there reading. The first quote I read was from the Dalai Lama, and it was, "Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them." And I thought, what a wonderful way to think about leadership. The second quote I read was from Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC, says, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." And I went, oh, duh, of course. Yeah. How come it's taken us thousands of years to actually work that out? He was right. And I still didn't know how to do it, Graham. Anyhow, I got back to San Diego after, a week or so in Sydney, and I was reading something in the local newspaper, the Union Tribune, and I read about a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. And it was put together by the guru of servant leadership, Dr. Ken Blanchard, and the university. And I went to an information session, and Ken was speaking, and he said, the problem with most leadership programs, they only get people in the head. We've got to start getting people in the heart. And I went, this could be where I could learn that. So I'm now, at that time, the CEO of a US public company. I went back to school. I enrolled in that university course, and for the next 2 years, weekends, I went to school and learned from people like Ken, and Ken became and still is, he's 87 years old now, a very dear friend. He's my mentor. And I was on the board of his company for 10 years. We actually wrote a book together called Helping People Win at Work. But that was the start of the learning opportunity to how do you build a culture where servant leadership is really the core.
And I understand that you were 44 and that was your first degree. It must have been a challenge to run a company and then take on learning in a very disciplined way. What made you think it was worth it?
Well, I wanted to confirm what I thought I knew and learn what I didn't know. And I had a lot of education through osmosis. There were a lot of theories that I had around leadership, but I'd never really studied them and been around others. So and not only that, it was a lot of fun. I mean, the first day of class, it was very interesting. There were about, I think, nearly 20 or maybe 30 people in the class, all executives. And I was the only CEO. And they said to me, "What the hell are you doing here? You're already the CEO. You've made it." I said, "I haven't made it. I've just begun." And even now I say I've just completed my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership. I need to put it to work.
Fabulous. And I know that you wrote a book called Any Dumb Ass Can Do It. Can you tell me about the background about what made you decide to do that? And what are the key principles that you cover in the book?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I wrote the book because I wanted to capture this journey of learning that I had over 25 years. And the book is made up of, a number of different, real learning experiences. It's actually talking about a donkey. And a lot of people think that they give donkeys a bad rap, but people think they're stubborn or slow. But let me give you the truth about a donkey. Donkeys are steady. They'll keep going long after others give up. They're loyal companions. You can count on them when the road gets rough. They
Mm,
protect you. They're calm, but they're extremely brave and watchful when it really matters. They're
mm,
practical. They're not flashy. They know how to conserve energy and get the job done. And while they might not always rush into things, Graham, that caution often keeps them safe. So when I
mm,
say any dumbass can do it, what I really mean is you don't have to be brilliant to be a great leader. You just need a bit of courage, a lot of care, and the humility to keep learning. Because,
mm,
like the donkey, leadership isn't about showing off, it's about
mm.
carrying the load, sticking with the journey, and helping others to get where they need to go. So
Yeah.
I call it donkey leadership.
And I understand that you have a philosophy, no failure, just learning moments. What led to that revelation?
Well, one of the most disabling fears we have is the fear of failure.
Mm,
And so, why do we want to create an environment in an organization where people are afraid to share what has worked well or what
mhm,
hasn't worked well? And when I was at school, I was saying, well, if you think about anything that has ever been developed, it's come from a series of learning opportunities.
mm,
So we said, we're going to take the word failure out of our vocabulary. We're going to say, we don't make mistakes, we have learning moments. And the
mm,
definition of the learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. It was a wonderful foundation that creates that openness where people, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Here's what I learned from it. This is how we can do it better next time. Or I tried this and I got this fabulous result from it. I need to tell everybody about it in the organization so they can benefit from my learning. And when you look at it, the number one responsibility of a leader is to be a learner and a teacher.
mm,
Coaching
mm.
is so important, but our job is to be a learner and a teacher.
I followed the career of Satya Nadella from Microsoft and the extraordinary turnaround that he made. But it was essentially going for a different mindset of we know it all to we learn it all. Every day we have to learn, otherwise we become obsolete.
Well, interestingly enough, WD-40, if you don't know the story, WD-40 was the result of 39 learning moments. Back in 1953 in San Diego, there was a challenge with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. And the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. And the chemists got together and started to formulate possible solutions. Formula One didn't work, five didn't work, 15 didn't work, 25, 39 didn't work, but Formula 40 worked. And that's why it's called WD, Water Displacement 40th Formula. So without those 39 learning moments, we wouldn't have that little blue and yellow.
I didn't know that, so thank you. That's a great anecdote.
Yeah,
With
and it's
regards
true.
to Ken Blanchard, what did you learn from him?
Oh, Ken says saying you're a servant leader is a good start, but it's your behavior that makes it real for people. And, again, it was, Ken says that, or Ken's whole theory is, people are there and if we can help them really develop into their better self, we all benefit. So, you know, his whole thing about servant leadership, where leaders love and involve their people, leaders are connected, spending time with their people. I call it spending time in the stinky locker room. They love learning. They know, though, that leadership is both a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. A lot of people say this culture stuff is soft. I'm going to tell you it's not soft at all. It's
Mm,
damn well hard. And really, we as those leaders out there, and myself included, should be ashamed. When you look at the latest data, 31% of people who go to work every day are engaged, which means nearly 70% of people who go to work each day are disengaged.
mm,
And great outcomes in organizations is made up of what I call the will of the people times strategy. You can have the best strategy in the world, Graham, but if you've got a low will of the people, you're not going to maximize the outcome of the organization.
yeah.
And you're not going to send people home happy. And servant leadership is about, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself.
Mm.
You learn something new, you're protected and you're set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy
Yeah.
people create happy families. Happy
Mm.
families create happy communities. Happy
Yeah.
communities create a happy world. We need a happy world, and we can do something about that.
I remember Bob Chapman once half jokingly saying, we want less divorce in our, in our workers. And if they're happy at work, they're more likely to be happy at home. So, but it applies, doesn't it? There is just so much evidence to show that care is contagious. Gallup talk about, if people feel that they're cared for by a supervisor or someone, and that is strongly agreed across the organization, the higher the productivity, the higher the profit, the higher the higher the customer service levels, and the longer people stay there. And these concepts of care and empathy and wanting the best for people, they're now really the strong skills, aren't they?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
knowledge
Yeah.
with AI, you get as much knowledge as you like, but being able to inspire, to get people behind a vision is what separates the great from the average.
McKinsey, in their State of Organizations 2026 report that just came out, they said when organizations give equal weight to people and performance, they are more than 4 times more likely than the average company to maintain top financial performance for 9 out of 10 years. That's McKinsey's latest research. And why it matters is the finding reframes the false choice between business performance and people investment. The data shows that they're not competing priorities, they're actually linked together. So, and if you can do that and send people home happy, you're actually making a positive difference to the community in the world. Imagine a dinner table at home at night. Dad or mum comes home, the kids are sitting around, and dad and mum are blah, blah, blahing about how they hate their job. What are the kids saying? I don't never want to do what you do. I don't want to be unhappy like you.
I think it was Marshall Goldsmith nominated you as the #1 culture coach. He's obviously had a very, very impressive career as well. So when you do go into an organization, do you just work with the CEO or do you work with the whole executive team? Or how do you approach an assignment where they want to have a better culture?
Well, I do both. What I've found and what I believe to be true is most leaders don't get up every day with an objective of being a jerk. My coaching practice basically is with the C-suite or the CEOs is, do you know who you are as a leader? And so it's called awareness. And we do that by doing stakeholder interviews and talking to people around you. And, I can say to someone, who do you think you are as a leader? And they'll give me an answer and I'll say, this is
Mm,
what your people say. And so this is true. And
mm,
the second part of it is intention. So after finding out what areas of servant leadership we can turn up the volume on, we have that. But then with the groups, you have to put the foundations in place too. So with the groups, we talk about, does your organization have a clearly defined purpose, something that is
mm,
bigger than just stopping squeaks? Do you have a set of values in the organization that drive the behavior in the organization? And those are
mm,
not the things that you frame and stick up on a wall. These are real living statements of behavioral intention within the organization. And then what's the leadership behavior that we need to do to live that? And then we talk about getting rid of this stupid word called manager and replacing it with the coach. And
mm,
it's so important when you think about a great coach, it's really something that people want. A great coach is committed to helping the player get an A and is brave enough to put the player's growth ahead of their own comfort. A great coach knows the game, the standards, and what it really does look like to win. And they spend a lot of time on the sideline resisting the urge to jump in and take over. That's called micromanagement. They
mm,
observe first, they listen deeply, and they watch how the play unfolds. And then they add value to the player by helping them play a better game. And most importantly, too, they spend a lot of time in what I call the stinky locker room. I invented someone called Alec or Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. I write about this in my book. And this is the person who has habits that they have a big ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. They're a micromanager. They're corporate royalty. They're entitled. They have a big corner office, a private parking spot. You'll never find them in the canteen or the cafeteria. They love a fear-based culture. They love to control. They have all the answers, Graham, especially the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't keep their commitments. So those are the sort of behaviors we want to get rid of. And that's why I created Alec or Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated.
What do you do for your self-care, keeping fuel in your own tank? What are the things outside of work that really keep you in a good place?
Well, I think the first one is gratitude. I think we all should take time to be grateful for what we have in life. I often say life's a gift, don't send it back unwrapped. So, that's important to us. And then, I teach. I love teaching. I've been teaching, but I'm living my purpose now, which really my new purpose in life, which is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. Now, apart from that, I travel to Australia once a year to see my daughter. We have a place in Hawaii, which I like to go to. I'm on the board of a couple of companies, on the board of trustees of a university. All of the things that I do are really linked to how can we help the world be a better place?
Yeah. We've mentioned Ken Blanchard and what you learned from him, and obviously you had quite a bit to do with Marshall Goldsmith as well. What are the key elements that you took away from knowing him and listening to him? And I believe you're part of their coaching program, the Marshall Goldsmith program. So yeah, just jumping back, what are the elements you learned from Marshall?
So I met Marshall when I was teaching at the University of San Diego. I taught there for 16 years and in the master's program there, and I taught corporate culture. I used his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, as one of the texts. And he was living in San Diego at the time. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, Marshall, will you come to my class and talk to my students?" He said, "Yes." So I hooked him. But what I learned from Marshall is a couple of things, is that, he 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 has the saying life is good, and that's true. But his whole thing about and he's kind of a practicing Buddhist, if you will, where, well, whether he's practicing or not, but he loves the Buddhist kind of theory. And it's like, let's make sure that we understand that life is about learning. Not everyone can ever be right. Let's let go of things. And, he often says, if you did what you think was right and you did your best, accept it, let it go, and make peace with it. And I think that's something that I learned from Marshall, that you just can't carry all that stuff around. Did you do your best? Did you do what you think was right? Make peace with it, move on, and let it go. Marshall's a great leader, a great coach of leaders, and I'm really grateful for the amount of time I've had to spend with Marshall.
And Gary, I understand your mother almost lived to 100, very, very close to being 100. Her.
Mum lived till 99 years and 9 months old, lived in the same family home in Great North Road 5 Dock for 72 years. And there's a chapter in my book dedicated to my mum. And the chapter is called Even the Queen Sits Down to Pee. And the whole essence of that was the story I talk about in the book is I'd fly down to Australia, and even in mum's aging time, I'd always arrive at the house at 5 Dock, and lamb's fry and bacon was always on the table, which was some of my favorite. But really, the whole essence from mum was never forget where you came from. Even the Queen sits down to pee. So yeah, I think that was something that was really a treasure that my mum gave, and a teacup that I took from the family home, because I always remember sitting at our kitchen table in the kitchen in 5 Dock, and a cup of tea with mum was always a time where you were challenged, but it was tough love, but it was true love. So it was, yep.
And your dad, 55 years with the same company, obviously a very diligent worker. What did you learn from him?
Yeah, Dad was actually 50 years from when he was 15 to 65. Dad was a couple of things. Number one, a man's word is a man's bond. So, keep your word. And Dad was he always had a saying that one of them was, let's be factual about this. Let's gather the facts. And I think that was a big learning. And then dependability. I saw him every morning. I don't know, getting up and going to work and coming home. And I think that was something that I learned from Dad. I guess he was the one that showed me the discipline of business.
There's a lot of challenges in today's workplace. The whole AI revolution is turning every organization upside down. There's the uncertainty in the Middle East, and in Australia, there's also a very real cost of living crisis. So there's lots of things, and basically, the stress levels of burnout is going up. Mercer found that 81% of employees were fearful they could burn out the next year. What can leaders do about that? Particularly if people really come to a point of crisis and could, have a session of anxiety or depression. What sort of things can a leader do to help change that or to make it easier?
Yeah, I actually write about that in the book too. Be an organization people want to escape to, not escape from. If you think about having an organization where you do really care about people and you do make them feel like they belong and they do see the work they matter. And, I know we're going through a lot right now, but was World War One and Two a lot? Uncertainty is something that we've lived with. It's just amplified these days because you hear about it virtually before it happens. So we're being bombarded. So turn off the damn TV and don't watch it that often. And, you know, and I listen to Australian radio nearly every day. The afternoon here, I'm listening to morning breakfast radio. So I know what's going. And I think that we have these challenges, but it's a great world and we'll get through it. But create a place where people want to come to work. Show them that they matter. Show them that they belong. Treat them with respect and dignity, with care, with candor, with accountability, with responsibility. I wrote an article when COVID was on. They talked about the Great Resignation. I called it the Great Escape. People were escaping toxic cultures. Build a culture where they want to come to work because that's where they know they're being recognized and people actually care about them.
Yeah. What are some other key elements from your book that people have mentioned to you they found really helpful?
There's a story in there that I think is really interesting. It's called Listen to the Alarm Bells, and I think it's something we should do as a leader. I was in London and I'd just flown in, I think, from Kuala Lumpur. I was there to go and meet with our leadership team in the UK. And I like British comedy and I don't mind a beer occasionally and a bit of curry's okay as well. So instead of going out one night, I said, I'm tired. I'm going to stay in my hotel room. And I went across the road to Sainsbury's and I picked up a takeout curry and probably a Stella, and went back to my room and I put on my t-shirt and my shorts and those flip-flops that you get in the hotel that never fit your feet. And I turned on the TV and was searching for some good British comedy, and the alarm bell went off in the hotel. And I did what I normally do. I paid no attention to it. I've stayed in thousands of hotels and that's happened occasionally. And someone's going to come on the PA system very soon and say it's a false alarm. Well, that didn't happen. And bang, bang, bang on the door, evacuate, evacuate. So I grabbed my passport and my cell phone. I run down the stairs and this is winter time in London, I must tell you. And before you know it, I'm standing in Berkeley Square in Mayfair in my shorts, t-shirt and flip-flops with my cell phone and my passport. And then it starts to rain. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Time went on and they cleared the hotel. It was a false alarm. And I got back to my room. So now my beer is hot. My curry's cold. I've missed the TV. I'm soaking wet. I'm freezing cold. And I'm saying, what the hell went on here? The next day or the couple of days later, I was flying back to San Diego and I was sitting in the plane. I thought, what was the learning moment from that event? And what really hit me was, are we listening to the alarm bells? And the whole thing behind that is there are these alarm bells going off around us. And are we choosing to ignore them and therefore finding ourselves out in the cold? So it became a real practice of mine to say, what alarm bells are going off around me right now? What of those alarm bells can really make a negative impact and I should pay attention to. That's a great story in the book called Listen to the Alarm Bells.
It's been very engaging and interesting having this conversation, Garry. And I always finish by asking the same question, and that is, knowing what you know now, with all your experience, all your background, all the anecdotes you've heard and seen, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
It's not about you, Garry. It's about the privilege you have in life to help others step into a better version of themselves.
What a beautiful message to finish up with. Thanks so much for being part of the Caring CEO, Garry.
Thanks. Pleasure to be with you.